collecting is, in my view, mostly an emotional activity. There's not much sense in chasing paintings, chasing vintage cars that may or may not even run, that you may only take out on a sunny Sunday. There is a lot of psychology involved. But have you ever seen anyone auctioning a yogurt or a 100 franc euro bill? No. And why is that? Because these are commodities, the latters. An auction for collectibles is necessary when the object is so rare that nobody knows it's spot on worth 100 francs. Maybe 110, 120, 150, 200. If an auction house does a good job, they only collect for their watch or whatever auction the rarest treasures that the collectors cannot find elsewhere. Not in a shop, not on eBay, not on their neighbor's wrist. We believe a good auction is when the market decides if it is double, triple, or quadruple the estimate, and not us offering it at a price in excess of market price and simply looking for a victim. We believe the market should decide in excess of the reserve price what it's worth.
Welcome to Luxury on Air, where we explore the trends, innovations, and personalities defining and redefining the luxury industry.
I've always been fascinated by auctions. It's a place where exceptional and unique pieces are being fought for, but in a very disciplined and almost aristocratic manner. Recent events, especially the rise of technology and COVID-19, have accelerated these get-togethers to evolve towards a more digital space. Nevertheless, here, not different than in other areas, the pendulum is moving again in the other direction towards a more experiential, in-person happenings. But what drives a collector to sell their piece of art? In which situation should they turn themselves towards an auction house? And for the bidders, why are they attracted? Is it the object, the adrenaline, the amusement, or the social get-together? And what is the influence of the auctioneer on the outcome of an auction? What is a white glove auction? We shall discuss this and much more during our new episode. My name is Karine Szegedi, and I'm really thrilled to animate our first Luxury on Air episode discussing the art of auctioneering. We will focus on luxury watch auctioning in this episode, and who else than world-renowned Aurel Bacs of Phillips in association with Bacs Russo could be my guest here. Aurel Bacs, who began his career as a watch specialist with Sotheby's, has become one of the most influential auctioneers. His flamboyant, charming, and somewhat provocative style is making every auction he leads to an event. Phillips, in association with Bacs Russo, is the watch department at Phillips Auction House, dedicated exclusively to the world's finest collector's watches. Launched in November 2014 by Aurel Bacs and his partner Livia Russo, the department was established in response to the ever-increasing needs for today's collectors to easily access scholarship, guidance, and quality across the board. With multiple world records, Phillips has become the undisputed worldwide market leader in watch auctions. With over $212 million in annual sales in 2024, and the first auction house to surpass $200 million in watch sales annually for 4 consecutive years. Its parents, Phillips Auction House, is one of the first 10 global auction houses and was founded 1798 in London. It specializes in modern and contemporary art, photographs, editions, design jewels, and watches. While this world of auctioning may be seen as quite exclusive to some of our listeners, but in this episode, we will dive into its many facets. I'm really excited and very happy to jump into this topic with you, Aurel. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Karine. Great to be with you here today. We'll get back to the provocative adjective that you've kindly bestowed on me, but it's great. I'm looking forward to an interesting conversation.
And I was almost adding in my intro, but I didn't. But I can say it now. You are in the private life as nice person as you are in the professional life. And it's a real pleasure to know you as well. A bit more on the off the hook side in front of the auctioneers.
Fully share and extend the same compliment to you, dear Karine.
It's a very good start into the episode. Let's then deep dive into the topic as we want to do it. So auction houses, I mean, they have been trusted institutions for very long. I mean, we've seen Phillips being around since 1798, and expertise, integrity, of course, paramount. But the rapid changes in technology, the market dynamics, all this has, of course, drawn a lot of significant transformation to the industry. So how can you give us maybe a picture on the recent history, on the events, and the different strategies that drive auctioneers to an auction?
Well, it's difficult to wrap up 2.25 of a century of history in a few moments, but the principle has never changed, that an object is sold to the highest bidder, which I believe, if you look at stock markets, is actually the same concept. It's supply and demand. From a technology perspective, a lot of things have changed. Initially, auctions were simply loosely exhibited goods. You would go to the sale room, look at it, literally during the auction, and raise your arm. With time, from what used to be a platform for dealers to buy objects from estates, families in difficult moments, became a global operation where at any moment from anywhere, anyone can bid, connected via phone, connected now via the internet, and now auction houses are connecting directly with the end user and not just supply to dealers and galleries objects.
So, you have now more market participants, but I believe what is still important, we spoke about the expertise, the influence, and the savoir-faire. Is that unchanged, or is even more of that required in these days?
Those parameters you mentioned, Karine, are in fact some and become more and more important. If you think of, for example, myself, I go to a restaurant, I love a good glass of wine, but I'm not myself a professional sommelier, master of wine. So I rely on good advice. Good advice from a sommelier where he says, with this fish or this meat, this would pair nicely. But then if he knows me, he also knows that I like more an oaky, a smoky, a whatever type of wine. He may also know my budget. And he may see how many people are seated at the table and will recommend the right format of a bottle. In the same way, doctors, lawyers give the best advice on a client's personal needs. Auction houses have to present the watches, the art, the jewelry in a way that even if you're not yourself a scholar, you can compete against those who have the knowledge at same arm's length. This means every object has to be researched as much as possible. We need to know what is an object worth. Or if we don't really know, because sometimes objects are so unique, we have to say it. We have to guide private collectors, novice collectors, in the same way as if they were as knowledgeable as museum directors and scholars. Integrity, it goes without saying. You cannot run such a business if people don't trust you. Let's not forget, you, Karine, and us, we're in the service industry. We don't have patents for magic medicine. We don't have big machines that make, even while we sleep, cars or electronics. So all we have is experience, knowledge, and our good reputation.
And trust and integrity and reputation is so key. I mean, of course, you say that we're in the service industry. We protect our name as we protect our house and our family. And this is the only good that we have and that on which we build. So couldn't agree more there. So we said we would a bit unpack, the dynamism and the secrecy or why somebody goes to an auction. So of course there is, the sellers that have to sell an object. There is the bidders, buyers, collectors that want to acquire an object. And then of course there's the auction house in between. if you want to maybe start with the sellers, I mean, why? Why would they sell an object firstly? Why do they come to an auction house? And how do you guide them? And how are they part of the whole process? Or they, at one point in time, they give you the object and you are free to do the transaction?
It's a very good question, and I like to again start with an example. You and your siblings inherit from your grandfather a watch. There are multiple ways how you and your family can dispose of this, assuming nobody in the family wants to keep it, or if it's a very valuable watch, you may not even have the means to pay out your sisters, your brothers, your cousins, your uncles. You can place an ad in a local newspaper. What would happen then? You would get phone calls, maybe from good people, maybe from not so good people. At 10 p.m. in the morning, at 6 a.m., at 10 p.m. in the evening, at 6 a.m. in the morning, they would ask you questions you couldn't possibly even answer because you're not the specialist. The advantage may be you reach the final buyer directly. The disadvantage, as you placed it in a local paper, you may only enjoy local demand. You may not have the Chinese collector, the Middle Eastern collector, the American collector coming to you. But you may also have very cumbersome, long conversations. And you have a day job and a family on top of that to look after. If you go to an auction house, the auction house will take care of everything. They will first of all say, Mrs. Szegedi, this watch is worth 50,000. You may not even know and undersell it, thinking it's only worth 5,000 because you didn't know that it had a special escapement or that it had a reference, a model number that is particularly rare. The auction house will then, once you agree to consign it, take care of everything that you otherwise would have done. From having it checked out by the watchmaker, talking to archives at manufacturers and museums to get the historic data right, illustrate it in a catalog and publish it online, tour it around the world. So also in Asia, in America, in the Middle East, all over Europe, people can examine it and make themselves an educated opinion how much they want to bid on it. Once comes the auction day, the auctioneer will, let's be fair about this, play all the interested parties against each other in order to achieve the highest price. You watch this online from the comfort of your sofa in your living room or on your app on your mobile phone and wait 35 days until the wire hits your bank account. It's very practical. Now, I gave the example of you and your family, but collecting is actually a very dynamic process. Any one of our listeners here today who collect anything will understand that you don't have unlimited space to store your collection, unlimited funds to add to your collection. Taste may evolve. And therefore, every collector in his long journey that takes sometimes up to half a century may let things go to create space, mental space, physical space, and free up funds to make new acquisitions later. Some dealers come to us, dealers who have a shop in Milan, in London, or elsewhere, who say, I have only 200 clients. You have 5,000 or 10,000 active collectors. You may reach people we cannot reach. So it's a very convenient platform for consignors, for vendors, to let somebody else do the job and achieve the best result on their behalf.
So very interesting. Thank you for unpacking this and explaining a bit better to our listeners. 3 questions popped into my mind. First one is, are you a psychologist? Did you study psychology? Because it takes quite some time to take care of the people. Because that's the second question. How attached are people that have to let go? I mean, you said, sometimes you have just no space, so you don't have the means. And sometimes you want to free up your mind. But if you don't, and if you need the funds and you have to sell, probably that's a difficult moment in time as well for the person that has to sell. And that which brings me to the third question. Is it sometimes happening that people are buying the object again, maybe after 10 years, 15 years, when maybe the times are different, and trying really hard to find the same object? And lastly, you mentioned they're looking at it in their, their sofa or on the app or online. Is it good or is it bad to watch it? Do they really want to know who the buyer is because it's important for them? Who will care or wear their watch going forward?
Very good, with Karine. These were 4 very, very good questions. So let me start with the psychology. No, I did not study psychology. Instead, I studied business and law. But in all fairness, I'm a university dropout. A few weeks before the final exam, I switched sides and went into the auction industry. But I must admit that in 30 plus years that I've been surrounded with collectors, yes, you become somewhat a master in psychology, because collecting is, in my view, mostly an emotional activity. There's not much sense in chasing paintings, chasing vintage cars that may or may not even run, that you may only take out on a sunny Sunday. There is a lot of psychology involved, naturally. Second, how attached are vendors? I think that at one point it meant the world to you when you bought this watch, or when you inherited it, because you have so many emotions attached to it, because it was your father's, your grandfather's beautiful watch, and you remember him or your grandmother wearing it. But at the same time, it's not that you're giving it up and you do not receive anything in exchange. The buyer is parting with often a substantial amount of money. So it's a trade-off. To some people, the emotional attachment to a watch is the most important thing in the world. But once that you receive 5, 6-digit, even 7-digit dollar amounts, and you say, wait a second, I can finally fix the roof of my house, or finally I can take my family on a beautiful 3-week trip around the world, or I can pay the studies of my children. There's a trade-off, and this is something that everyone has to, for themselves, decide, do I rather want the watch, or do I rather want to use the money for starting even a new business? Regarding the buying it back 10 years later, yes, of course, some collectors realize with time, 10 years ago I sold this, and in fact I've never seen a better one, I'd like to buy it back. And they start all over again, hunting down either the very example or a similar example. How many collectors have I met who said, I'm now 80 years of age, I'm selling my entire collection, my children have no interest in it. They collected tens and tens of millions of dollars, and this is now a practical example of a client I spoke early this morning to. And at one point he said, I don't know if my doctor leaves me 5, 10 or 20 years more, but I cannot live another day without my watches. And he started all over again. So it happens. It happens. Watching it, that was your last question from the sofa. Well, you know that every Saturday evening, I think, at 7 p.m., there is the draw of the lottery numbers. I don't know if you ever played, but some people are glued to the TV screen with the ticket in the hand, saying, oh my God, 12 was drawn. Oh my God, 21, we have already 2 right. Others say, I'll wake up on Sunday morning, check it online, and see if I was lucky or not. That's again a very personal choice. It is, of course, nail-biting to either sit personally in the room and watch your item come up. Hopes are always high. It's natural that every vendor thinks their watch must be the next world record, as every parent thinks their child is the most beautiful child. And I think that's even the case for the gorilla mother. And there's, again, no answer for everyone, but that's part also of our guidance, that we say, well, I think you should rather just go to the movie theater and check the result after the auction. Will help clients to make from A to Z the best experience for them on a commercial level, but also on a psychological, emotional level.
There we are again, the client service and the psychology. So we looked at the sellers, at the vendors, as we call them, but now let's look at the bidders, collectioners, buyers. What drives them into the auction house? What drives them into the physical auction, or what drives them to maybe not be there? And do they want to have fun? Do they want to acquire a piece of art? Or do they just look for the excitement or the exchange or the mundane get together? What would be the different aspects?
Another great question, and I'm glad you asked it. Let me again come with a very obvious example. There are auctions for art, for old-timers, for extraordinarily rare vintage wine, and of course for watches. But have you ever seen anyone auctioning a yogurt? Or a $100, 100 franc euro bill? No. And why is that? Because these are commodities, the letters. And you and I both know that a 100 Swiss franc note is worth 100 francs. At 99 francs, it's a deal. At 101, you're overpaid. Hence, there are no auctions for commodities. Therefore, by definition, an auction for collectibles is necessary when the object is so rare that nobody knows it's spot on worth 100 francs. Maybe 110, 120, 150, 200. If an auction house does a good job, they only collect for their watch or whatever auction the rarest treasures that the collectors cannot find elsewhere. Not in a shop, not on eBay, not on their neighbor's wrist. Therefore, we source the rarest objects, the best preserved objects in the world that the collectors cannot find elsewhere. If you are passionate about this object, there is no alternative than going to this auction, because that's where you stand a chance to finally acquire it when it was for 5, 10, 20 or 50 years on your wish list. Why do you then choose to either go personally to the auction or do it from the comfort of your sofa? You may go to Geneva, that you can, up until the last hour before the auction, personally inspect the object. You can spend an hour with it, with a loupe, closing in on every small detail, even putting it on your wrist and see if it's too small, too big, too thick, too bright, anything, if it fits on your wrist. Second, if we manage to convene hundreds of like-minded collectors, I tell you, this is like going to the football stadium versus watching the football match from the comfort of your sofa.
Very different.
It's very different. To some people, it might be too nerve-wracking, too emotional, but for others, this is the ultimate experience. You meet collectors, you exchange know-how, you exchange scholarship, you have a good, fun dinner with friends from California, from Japan, from Dubai, all together, learn, take away information that is unique. That will not come to your sofa, for sure. But some people might find it so stressful to be in the middle of the action, they say, I've seen the watch at a traveling exhibition in Singapore or in New York. I love it. Here's my $20,000 bid. If I get it, I'm happy. If I'm not, tant pis, it's life. So again, there's no one recipe for all. You can equally be at home, but participate via the app online. And I tell you, the Phillips app is so state-of-the-art that it literally feels like you are in the middle of the action. But you still cannot hug and shake hands with other collectors. But you do not miss out a subtle detail, a smile of the auctioneer, a paddle in the first row, because we have half a dozen of cameras in the room that give you really the full experience how it works.
So is there, we've seen in our research that the younger generation, they prefer buying online because there's the fear of the salesperson and to enter a luxury store, because they're so much used to digital natives just to be behind their mobile phone, which is a bit of a security. Do you feel the same? Is there now maybe a fear and it's easier just to be on the app? Or are they attracted by the atmosphere, and you see that the younger generation is entering as well the auction house?
Another fascinating question. There's again everything. The technology is so good today that I can assure anyone who does not want to travel 12 hours around the globe to come to Geneva, you can perfectly, easily, well participate from home. Some may not have the time to travel from Los Angeles to Geneva for a weekend and back. They have day jobs. They have other obligations. It is our job to give everyone the most comfortable access to participating. On the other hand, once you're a collector, it's not the same just being on your sofa at home. And therefore, we have clients who travel an entire day from Japan, from Australia, from California, from South America to be with the community for that weekend. If we look at the growth rate, they are actually in sync. The in-person bidding in the room, the phone bidders, and the online bidders. But I also admit that the largest delegation are now online bidders.
And what about the generational gap? Do you see that maybe the room is more seasoned and the younger generation would rather go online than come into the room? Or with the new vibrant collectors communities that exist as well in art and in watches in particular, where often they have amazing collections under the age of 30 already, they would still come to the room?
I think it really depends if you are a occasional collector or a real watch addict. No matter if you're 20, 40 or 60, the more hardcore you're collecting, the more likely you're taking off Friday and Monday to travel from California or from Singapore to Geneva. Yes, we have collectors 70, 80 or more of age who are just not familiar, comfortable with technology and still prefer a paper catalog, still prefer a handshake, still prefer the physical experience of the watch. That's a fair assessment. But really, there is no cultural difference between geographies or between age groups.
Okay.
With that said, it is naturally easier for someone from London to come to Geneva to attend the auction than someone who is in New Zealand. That's a given. And maybe therefore we have more Europeans in a Geneva room, as much as we have more clients from Asia in a Hong Kong auction or more Americans in a New York auction. That's by the definition of distance.
Makes sense. So we've looked at the sellers, we've looked at the collectors, now we look at you. You as an auctioneer and the auction house. What makes your success? What is important to have? I mean, we mentioned expertise, we mentioned psychology, but there is as well, you have to, understand the object and you have to price the object, because you have a catalog price and you have a starting price. And this has to be set with a lot of caution, expertise, knowledge, finesse. And then of course you have to be brilliant. I think the day of the auction, how do you prepare yourself as well for such days?
I think the starting point for the auction house specialist, for the auctioneer, but also for clients, the secret word is preparation. In order to be a good auction house specialist, you first of all need to absolutely know everything there is to know about the object. Certainly, if you bring me your inherited vintage watch, I can only ask you, what's the story from your family? But you may say, I don't know, which was founded in the bank vault of my late aunt. We have the archives, so we know how it started. But then there might be sometimes gaps of up to half a century or more that nobody can fill because the information has been lost. Preparation also means to know and to advise the potential bidders by asking them, what is it that draws you to this watch? Why are you looking for this watch? And you may find it surprising to hear, more often, we specialists at Phillips advise clients not to bid on a certain object when we feel that it is not the right model, the right vintage, the right size, the right condition, the right budget for them. We are horological matchmakers, if you allow me that term. And our secret to success is to give everyone the best possible advice, but not just to quickly close a deal. And it happens so often when you go to High Street, you try on a dress, you think it's too tight, and the lady or the man in the shop says, no, Mrs. Szegedi, that's how people wear it these days. It has to be uncomfortable. It has to be tight. And you say, were you just quickly thinking of a commission, or did you really sincerely advise me to the best of your professional knowledge? Truth is, if I quickly try to sell something to someone, yes, I may have a sale, but that client will be a week or two later frustrated and angry and disappointed. And we've lost a valuable client. The most valuable lesson I remember from my business school is a happy client is telling 5, 10, 20 friends how happy they are. An unhappy will not only tell 100 friends how unhappy they are, but they will post it on social media. They will go all about it. So the most valuable thing we have is our reputation. Mm-hmm. And this is why more often we advise clients, wait for another one. There's a different model we think is better for you, but it may only come up in 6 months. But also that we tell clients, don't go and bid more than 20,000 because there will be another one 2 weeks later in a Hong Kong auction that you may buy for 19,000. And therefore, we give them the best possible advice. So preparation on our end is key. To know your client, to know what drives them in their minds, in their hearts, to potentially bid on an item. Preparation is also important on the client side. You cannot just walk into an auction room, grab a paddle, and while the auction is underway, raise your paddle and think you make a steal. You need to know what you're bidding. You need to know what comparables have achieved in the past. You need to know what are the fees and the taxes involved. Does it need a repair or does it need a service? All this is like when you buy a house. You don't just go and say, oh, look, there's a nice tree in the garden. Let's buy this house. You go with your architect, check the roof, check the windows, check the heating, check the condition of the house. There's a theoretical and an emotional aspect, and both need to be covered.
And is the fee structure clear to every seller and every buyer when they engage with you?
I very much assume so. We make it very clear what the commissions are. If you cannot find it in the back of the auction catalog or on the website, ask a specialist to make you a projection. If I pay 20,000 and if I want the watch in London delivered to my house with a new strap, fully repaired, duties paid, how far can I bid that my budget of X is not exceeded? And we do the math backwards, the same way people forget that there are notary fees when you buy a house, that a roof may need to be fixed. This is important and is part of the preparation. But it sounds to me equally, well, does anyone who goes to the supermarket know how much they pay for the liter of milk? Yes, there's a price tag on it. It should be crystal clear to everyone. And if not, ask our staff.
Thank you. That's I think it's an important aspect. And one question you didn't answer, maybe you don't want to answer, but you tell me, what is your personal preparation for an auction? Is it like a marathon? Is it like a sprint? How do you get ready to be top-notch?
An auction, and we're just now preparing the November auction in Geneva, is at least a 6-month-long preparation process. First are the watches. The auctioneer needs to know every detail of every watch that possibly is available. I've been an auctioneer in other areas, and believe me, I'm not the same auctioneer if I'm selling Persian rugs, Chinese vases, or toy trains. Because I still don't understand the nuances, the subtleties, the scholarship of these areas. And even if you read it, and there's a lot of reading in every auction catalog, you still haven't emotionally fully absorbed all the subtleties. As the catalog is published, we start receiving feedback from the market. Mr. Smith calls and says, "Ooh, that Rolex, I really want it." And Mr. Lee calls, "I want this Patek Philippe so much." And we start having dialogues with those clients. So by the day of the auction, I should have a rather good knowledge. Who wants this? Who wants that? Where there's 10 telephones and 10 collectors in the room wanting it, hence their strong interest, or which watch may only have 2 or 3 bidders. Once the auctioneer is on the rostrum, that's the podium from where the auctioneer is orchestrating the auction, you need to know who sits where in the room. Mr. Lee's front right, Mr. Smith is far left. And on the phone to my colleague in Taiwan is collector so-and-so. And online, San Francisco 1234 is such and such tech billionaire. Then you start putting the ingredients together, like if you prepare a menu for your family. It's all about timing. It's all about knowing in which chronological order the ingredients come together. Then it's about knowing who really wanted it, maybe a little trigger shy. But you know you do them a good service by encouraging them to go further. So they don't say after the auction, I regret I didn't go another 2,000 more. But it's also important to know this is it, this is the end, and don't drag it on by saying, is anybody giving me another 2,000? And go on and on and on. Once you know the battle has been fought, the winner stands, there's no reason to beat the dead horse any further. So you need to know every ingredient from the watch to the audience to the market, exchange rates, interest rates, the greater economical system. You probably can do a pretty good job to do justice to each piece and for every collector.
This sounds like a marathon rather than a sprint, Aurel.
Absolutely, I agree.
When I listen to you, I now understand more and more the barriers to entry to do a good auction, because just putting people in the room is one thing. To be able to orchestrate, play, understand, and make it really the success that you want to have is another one. Huh? And that brings me to my next question, because I'm never short of questions. Is you mentioned knowing your clients, and you mentioned as well that the technology coming up, more people online, more people on the phone. How do you continue knowing your clients? Can you only know a few of them? Do you still have to feel the room, even though you have digital means and phone? How do you assess this now when there's so many players?
Another very good question. When I started in the auction industry, quite spot on 30 years ago, there were maybe 50 bidders in the room, mostly Europeans. For sure, there wasn't online. In fact, there weren't even online catalogs because the auction houses didn't even have websites 30 years ago. Therefore, I had every single of the 50 men, I must admit. I knew their first name, I knew where they lived, and I had the phone number on speed dial on my phone. And I knew more or less before the auction who's going to raise their arm on which lot. Surprises were very few. As the global community grew, auction houses started opening watch offices, watch departments in Hong Kong, in Japan, in Singapore, in all corners of the world, in the Middle East. And therefore, with thousands of active clients today, it is normal and natural that little me in Geneva, I have no control over who these thousands are and what they want. In many instances, we don't even speak the same language. Now, therefore, it is important that we as Phillips have in all these parts of the world local specialists who are literally like a government, no president of a single country can know every other president around the world. Why? What do they have? Ambassadors. The ambassador is talking to the local president or secretary of state and relays the information back to the home base.
Mm-hmm.
So when we are entering the final week or 2 weeks, I'm speaking daily to my colleagues in Japan, in Singapore, in Hong Kong, in China, around the world. They feed me with information from their clients whom I have maybe never met. And this helps me to close the puzzle and understand what we're looking at. I must admit, though, it is by no means an obligation for a collector to let us know before the auction what they want, why they want it, how much they will bid. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of perfectly self-sufficient, independent collectors who say, thank you for all your service, I don't need it. Going back to my first example with the sommelier, there are clients who say, thank you, sommelier, bring me this bottle on the list, the 1982 is my favorite, go away.
Mm-hmm.
No advice, no exchange, that's fine. That's fine.
That's fine, but you sometimes miss interesting surprises and good discovery of nice wine. We like to be.
I agree. I am definitely one of the most faithful sommelier clients because I've made the best surprises when guided by a specialist. As a matter of fact, aren't we all these days, thanks to Google and AI, all doctors, all lawyers, all bankers and watch specialists? I spoke to a doctor recently who said, these days, when I open the door for my 10 o'clock visit, the patient comes in and first he's reading me out everything he's already found on Google because he thinks by now he's a doctor. Then I do all the exams and I found out that it's completely the opposite. So don't make the mistake by reading blogs, by reading the catalog, thinking you know it all. I'm, again, the best example of how you can love wine and still need the good guidance of a sommelier who means well. But that's, again, the reputation the sommelier has. You screw me once, I'm never going back to that restaurant. I'm never going to listen to his advice again. And but it's okay. I mean, if you're yourself a sommelier, I'm sure you don't need the sommelier colleague's advice. That's fair.
Makes total sense. And going back to this new, technology and this new customer base and collectors base, what we've seen, of course, is that e-commerce rising. Luxury was a bit slower to pick up. I mean, it's easier to buy maybe a handbag, shoes, clothing online. If it's a watch where it's difficult to transport and it's a lot of money, people still prefer the experience in store. But we've seen as well that on the primary market, objects for 200K or up to 300K can be bought online now. So there is, the barrier of buying high-end objects online is rising. We see as well, of course, in the US where there's very spread. There's not a shop in every location, or China, who is more digitally savvy and use it more fluid, I would say, is of course easier to picks up quicker in the online sale. For you, you have, of course, the catalogs. You can see the watches before the auctions. You have as well itinerary movements where the people can see them not only in the space, I think, of the auction, but elsewhere. How important is it still for the client to see the watch before buying it? Or people, as you mentioned, they said, I don't need any advice. I know what I need. I see the watch. You guarantee me the certification of if I want, and I just buy it and don't need to see it. Or people still say, well, if I wear it on my wrist, I want to put it on, or I want to see it because I can't buy just on pictures or online.
Without a doubt, today we live in a hybrid system between physical and digital.
Mm-hmm.
Attending an auction in person is actually only the moment of the transaction. But how many collectors have seen the object 2-3 weeks before personally in Singapore, but then don't travel to Geneva, as it's only the transaction that then takes place and that you don't need to be physically present? How many collectors have asked us to send them pictures of the watch on the wrist, and they have identified an employee of Phillips who has exactly the same skin color, the same wrist size, so they know what it would look on theirs. So we often model the watches for them.
Without AI, a real person.
Absolutely, without AI, promised. So there are watches you cannot and should not buy without experiencing them personally. But there are watches, contemporary watches, where, for example, there's no element of patina involved. Patina is the degree of aging and discoloration you may or may not find on a vintage dial, where one is like the other. And if you know what Model A looks like on your wrist, you know what Model A would look on the Phillips auction on your wrist as well. It's without being politically too incorrect, there's 50 shades of physical and digital, and for every transaction and for every collector, there's the right degree of gray tone on that spectrum.
Understood. And I mean, we spoke about your success and your history and expertise. Do you want to maybe share with the listeners first what a white glove sale is, auction, and do you want to share maybe of the most iconic pieces that you've sold? I mean, we spoke about the 200 million bar having now been exceeded 4 years in a row. Is it a lot of small pieces? Is it a few iconic pieces? Can you just give us a few examples so that people understand what are you really selling?
Absolutely, with great pleasure. So let's go quickly back to when you asked me about the vendor and the buyer. The vendor can ask for a reserve price. A reserve price is the minimum price they expect to achieve, and if nobody bids that minimum price, then the watch, the artwork, remains unsold. And it goes back to the vendor. Not something to be particularly happy about, because imagine you're a vendor in Washington, you ship it to Geneva, there are shipping costs, insurance costs, custom clearance costs involved. We look at it, we agree to a reserve price, catalog it, photograph it, research it, tour it around the world, put it at auction. Nobody says, yes, I'm bidding 10,000. It has to go back. Once again, all the shipping costs involved. End of the story. No success, but a lot of expenses for nothing.
Frustration, yeah.
It's frustrating for the vendor who hope to maybe then buy a new car or go on holidays, and instead they just have their watch back 6 months later. Therefore, it is a paramount responsibility of the auction house to know what is it really worth and what is a intelligent reserve price where the object is protected against a underperformance, but not to the extent where it doesn't stand a solid chance to achieve a result at or in excess of the reserve. Therefore, the quality of an auction house can be measured and the knowledge of the team by the sold rate. The same way that if you are an Olympic athlete shooting and you miss out of 10 bullets 10 times, well, then you're not a good shooter. If you hit 10 times right into the center, I think you're pretty good. And a white glove sale, now to answer your sale, is when out of 100 watches, 100 are sold. That means in every single lot number, the reserve price is met or exceeded. Many say a good auction is somewhere if it's 85, maybe 90% sold. Excellent auctions are 95% sold. And Phillips had the longest streak, and I think it was 3 or 4 years long, where in Hong Kong, in New York, in Geneva, we've had white glove sales. Every time throughout the pandemic and beyond, we've sold 100%. So that's
very
a white
impressive,
glove
if
sale.
I can say that. Very impressive.
Look, I find it is our responsibility to not only advise the vendor what is realistically achievable, but it is also our moral and professional duty not to propose watches that actually are not worth the estimate and the reserve price at which we propose them. It's basically like the butcher or the fish shop putting somewhere in a corner fish from last week, hoping that someone who doesn't smell it picks it up. That's unfair, that's not professional, that's not ethical.
Mm.
We believe a good auction is when the market decides if it is double, triple, or quadruple the estimate, and not us offering it at a price in excess of market price and simply looking for a victim. I leave that to other players. We believe the market should decide in excess of the reserve price what it's worth.
So what did you sell, Aurel? Tell us.
Oh, as you can hear from my timbre in my voice, I'm still totally passionate about the next discovery. And there will be exciting discoveries this fall season. Stay tuned, ladies and gentlemen. Well, I guess I'm now associated with the sale of Paul Newman's Paul Newman. And I say that for two reasons. Yes, it is still the world's highest price ever achieved for a vintage wristwatch, over $17 million, a stainless steel Paul Newman Daytona. A watch that the world was looking for decades, as sometime in the 80s, Paul Newman stopped wearing it. He did no longer appear in magazines at Oscar parties with the watch on his wrist, and the world wondered where has it ended. And one day, in 2016, I receive a phone call. I've got Paul Newman's watch. And it was actually the former boyfriend of Nell Newman, the eldest daughter of the late Paul Newman. It took us over a year to research it, to get all the clearance for the image rights, to speak to family and friends of the late Paul Newman, to really get the entire story right, to dig out family albums with the family where the watch was seen, where James Cox, the boyfriend who was the vendor in the end, was with Paul Newman wearing the watch. And I started bidding at $1 million, which was 10 times already the value of a normal Paul Newman that you or I could maybe one day have. And the first phone bid at $10 million. Ed Dolman, the CEO back then of Phillips, said, in my 40-year career in the auction industry, I've never seen an opening bid jumping to 10 times the estimate.
Did he win the watch, the person that called for 10 million?
No. Can you imagine? He was the underbidder in the end.
But I hope that the new owner is wearing it and not putting it only in a safe.
As far as I know, it is now on permanent exhibit in Los Angeles. So it is preserved for humanity, for the world, the community. Now, why was that such an emotional moment for me? First, because we worked over a year with lawyers, with the family, with friends. I got to meet Mario Andretti, who raced with Paul Newman. I've met the daughters. I've met so many friends and families of the late Paul Newman. To me, Paul Newman was always an incredible hero. No scandals in all his Hollywood years. Married to the one and only Joan Woodward. A father to children. He remained humble. He was so charitable, so generous. He donated, I think, from memory, over $1 billion thanks to Newman's own. I mean, pretty much. And he was bloody good looking and a great actor on top. So, and to get to know him somewhat personally, though I've never met him in person, of course, through the family was a hugely emotional journey. Selling a watch at $17+ million is also pretty exciting for an auctioneer. I think my heart stopped beating more than just once during that auction. And knowing that James Cox and Nell Newman did good with the funds, because it wasn't just to buy a new Ferrari, it was for her natural conservancy project to protect nature in so many different art parts. It was a beautiful journey. But I've had as many emotions with unsung heroes, where the watch wasn't worth 17 million, where the vendor wasn't famous, but someone said, we're selling this watch because we need to build a new family home that was destroyed with an earthquake or with a flooding. The kids need an education. We're now parting this watch. And families whose name was never published, who wrote me for many Christmases later, wishing you and your family all the best for the holidays and the new year, meeting you, selling the watch with you, achieving more than we ever hoped for, allows us now as a family to go back and have a solid life. Hugging these fine people are the stories I can not publicly share with the details, but that have deeply marked me and that get me up every morning at 6 o'clock with a smile saying, hooray, I can do another exciting day in the office.
Isn't that amazing? Yeah, and we're speaking while I'm today celebrating my 30th anniversary at Deloitte. And I think
congratulations!
Looking at the old pictures and everything and, remembering all these 30 years and saying that not one day I haven't been jumping out of my bed like you, just because it's so exciting and I love what I do, which is a privilege in both our situations, I think.
Don't misunderstand me. There have been more days I was tired than not, but having and adrenaline is actually possibly the best medicine for an exciting life. I must say that. I feel utterly privileged to have found a mission in my life, though often in younger years I wondered, what is my contribution to society? I'm only selling objects that nobody needs. But when you hear and experience these stories behind the scenes, it really gets you up in the morning.
I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more with you. Thank you for sharing that. And we are unfortunately coming a bit to the end of the show. So the question is now, what about the next steps? What is the future? We always try to look, luxury areas, look towards the future, how this world will evolve, how overall will this, auctioning has been there for hundreds of years. Will it continue for the next 100 of years? Will there always be the passion, the emotions, the love for art? Because it's the art that allows you as well to do what you do. What is your take?
There are many, many developments that are currently undergoing that on one hand sometimes scare me, on the other hand make me excited to be part of this next chapter in the auction industry. On a technology front, yes, AI is coming step by step. I wonder if one day you have an AI auctioneer, an AI specialist, an AI catalog producer. I doubt it, because at the same time, lawyers, doctors, and bankers would equally be threatened that their patients, their clients do no longer need their good advice. I'm one of the least tech-savvy people on the planet, hence I cannot predict how it's going to change, but there will be an impact without a doubt. Secondly, there's still so much we all need to learn as a community. Every time we rediscover something, like a archaeologist who digs out a bone that they say that doesn't belong to this dinosaur and that doesn't belong to that mammoth, so what is it? And a new species is found and another missing link is added to the history books, to the science books. Same happening in our industry. The community grows as we speak now since over half an hour. We've started in the 80s and 90s with 10, 15, 20 nations at most being interested in vintage, high-end mechanical watches. At a proper international Phillips auction, we have close to 80 nations competing. Remember when I said you want to sell your family's heirloom watch and advertise it in the local paper? You would at most have one, maybe two nations even reading that paper. 80 nations is a global network of so many different tastes, budgets, age groups, cultural backgrounds. But I tell you, there's another several dozens of countries that vintage or fine mechanical watches are yet to conquer. So there's geographical growth. We often discuss the globalization of our society. I can wholeheartedly say the globalization has propelled fine mechanical watches into a sphere that probably no CEO and no specialist thought 20, 30 or more years ago we would ever reach. Lastly, I believe that the more our society is going mainstream with smartwatches, digital tools, AI, the more we hold on to handmade, handcrafted, unique objects that tell a story. Nobody wants to have just the same mobile phone, just the same white t-shirt for $4.99 in the 3-pack. Nobody wants to eat the same fast food meal. We're looking for experiences, we're looking for emotions, and so many emotions have been lost in the last few decades as we became so much more technological, that in the end, I am hopeful and optimistic that fine, meaningful, and I must stress out the word meaningful, mechanical watches have a great future ahead.
And you make me very happy when you say this, because I deeply believe the same. And we see more and more people want to have a story to tell when they look at their wrist and make it something special. And that is not only there to tell the time, because to tell the time can be up. Well, this was a real pleasure. I mean, I think the analysis that you gave with a lot of finesse, with a lot of personal examples, with a lot of personal stories and feelings was really, really interesting. I think our listeners have learned a lot. I have learned a lot. It was really a great moment. And I wish you a very successful future as a horological matchmaker, as you said. And I even have problems spelling out this word, but horological horological matchmaker is an interesting concept. Thank you so much, Aurel.
It's been a huge pleasure. I hope that many of your listeners are less intimidated today to enter an exhibition, an auction room, to speak to a specialist and enjoy what has given me so much pleasure in the last 40 years of my life. And thank you for having me here on your show today. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to Luxury on Air with Karine Szegedi and Felicitas Morhart. This podcast is provided to you by Deloitte, Switzerland and the Swiss Center for Luxury Research. If you've enjoyed this episode, you can leave us a 5-star review. If you're keen to stay up to date on what's trending in the luxury industry, don't forget to subscribe. As always, you can find more information about the current episode in the show notes. We wish you all the best. Until next time.